Hello again, welcome back, and let's get started for our final session of day 2. This is a session that's called Visions Towards Social and Environmental Justice. Really interesting debate, really interesting panelists who I'm going to introduce you to now. The moderator of this event will be Xolile George. Now, he's CEO of South African Local Government Association from Johannesburg, I do believe, yes? From Johannesburg, welcome. And on Xolile's panel, we have Núria Marín. I'm sure many of you know her, but she is the mayor of L'Hospitalet City Council. And Carlos Moreno, you might have seen him a little bit earlier in the day as well, one of the Leadership Award winners. But he's Paris Mayor's Special Envoy for Smart Cities. And Ana Paula Matos, Vice Mayor of Salvador de Bahía, Brazil. And joining us online, technology allowing, we should have Hastings Chikoko, who is the Regional Director for Africa at C40 Cities. Voila. Welcome, Hastings Chikoko. Your panel is all lined up and everybody's looking forward to hearing from you. I'll hand over to you now. Have a good debate.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Good afternoon to everyone present here and to everyone who is joining us from elsewhere. You are all welcome. As I've been introduced already, I'll be facilitating this session with the rest of this esteemed panel before us that is both physically present, but also one of our colleagues who's a panelist is joining us online. So the format of our discussion, we will be examining this fascinating topic that has drawn all of you to be here. You are all welcome. And we'll be looking at examining the visions towards attaining social and environmental justice. Very interesting topic in the context of where we are as the global community, confronting many challenges that have not only exposed what we mean to each other, how connected we are, and how difficulties of the moment can really draw all of us to be focused on one single enemy that is quite devastating. So it's quite interesting where we are in the context of having adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, to be also focusing on examining the dimensions that are around the question of environmental and social justice. How are these intersecting? How do we ensure that in pursuit of sustainable development, we are able to tackle all these elements? So my esteemed guest today will be looking at those areas. I'll be sharing with them, allocating 4 minutes for each of you, starting with you, Núria, and then followed by Carlos. And after Carlos, followed by the mayor of, the vice mayor of Salvador, to also share with us some of these visions you have in your interesting leadership roles that you have played in leading the city here, and also your role that you have played as vice mayor of Salvador. Quite interesting discussion that I've had with you earlier on. And also Carlos, the man behind a very interesting concept of 15 minutes cities. And my colleague who's based in South Africa, who is regional director for C40's Hastings, that we have been together for quite some time. What are some of these areas that they want to drive? So I'll start with you, Madam Núria. Share with us how your city, you have been able to give concretely this vision of leading development in a city in a balanced way, but at the same time tackling these two dimensions of environmental and social justice. Share with us your vision of how to drive these areas.
Muy bien. Pues buenas tardes a todos y a todas. Y lo primero de todo, quería daros la bienvenida a Hospitalet. Estamos en este trocito que estamos aquí disfrutando de este encuentro. Es Hospitalet. Muchas veces la marca, ¿no?, internacional es la marca Barcelona, la Fira es la Fira de Barcelona, pero estamos en un trocito de feria que corresponde a la ciudad de Hospitalet. Hospitalet es una ciudad, la segunda ciudad en población, en número de habitantes de Cataluña, y por tanto estamos encantados de acoger este evento, por otra parte, muy importante para el desarrollo económico y social de nuestros pueblos y ciudades y de esta realidad que es el área metropolitana. Sin duda, por tanto, es un placer y compartir, ¿no?, este espacio de lujo con vosotros, con representantes, ¿no?, de Brasil, de París, de Europa, y también pues, compartiendo de forma online, ¿no?, con otro continente. Por tanto, creo que es importante el que estemos aquí todos juntos. Yo creo que todos vamos a coincidir en que estamos en una situación, ¿no?, de emergencia climática, no hay duda, y también pues el COVID ha puesto de relevancia, ¿no?, las desigualdades que existen sociales en nuestras sociedades. Y por tanto, esas desigualdades que han ido apareciendo de una forma más evidente y que han ido creciendo, bueno, de alguna forma son dos caras de la misma moneda, porque si pensamos un poco, durante muchas décadas, ¿no?, los países más ricos han sido los países que más emisiones, ¿no?, han emitido de una forma además bastante descontrolada, y que han generado los estragos, ¿no?, que estamos padeciendo en estos momentos. Por tanto, hemos visto en esa cumbre, ¿no?, que acaba de finalizar, de Glasgow, cómo se han aplazado aquellas compensaciones, ¿no?, de las zonas más vulnerables. Por tanto, de nuevo, estamos viendo cómo quien más lo necesita tiene que esperar, y por tanto eso también se está replicando en estos momentos. Yo no quiero alargarme, quiero dar algunos conceptos. Uno de ellos es que somos las ciudades, o son las grandes ciudades, las ciudades grandes, como es ¿no?, el área de París, como puede ser esta realidad metropolitana de Barcelona, como tantos y tantos ejemplos, donde vive, ¿no?, a nivel mundial el 50% de la población, donde se genera el 70% de las emisiones, y por tanto es aquí donde en primera instancia hemos de librar la batalla para minorar esas desigualdades y hacer frente a esta emergencia climática. Somos nosotros, somos los representantes locales, somos las alcaldesas y los alcaldes los que hemos de liderar esa lucha, los que estamos viendo, ¿no?, las consecuencias de ese cambio climático, como hemos visto esos incendios, como hemos visto, ¿no?, esos efectos naturales que se están produciendo, y somos nosotros, los ayuntamientos, los municipios, la columna, la base que se va a desarrollar socialmente, culturalmente, económicamente y ambientalmente esta sociedad, donde desde las ciudades podemos implementar, podemos experimentar soluciones importantes, ¿no?, que después escucharemos, como es ¿no?, el París de los 15 minutos. Nosotros también lo planteamos en Hospitalet, ¿no?, ese Hospitalet incluso con menos tiempo que vosotros, ¿no?, pero esas ciudades más amables en las cuales podamos trasladarnos a pie de una forma mucho más sostenible, donde por supuesto, esas experiencias podemos escalarlas a otro nivel, a nivel nacional, a nivel internacional. Por tanto, es importante experimentar esa limitación, por ejemplo, de la circulación de coches contaminantes. Hospitalet es un ejemplo, es la única ciudad de toda el área metropolitana de Barcelona donde 100% su territorio está dentro de ese espacio de cero emisiones o de bajas emisiones. Es en las ciudades donde podemos experimentar y mejorar el transporte público, donde podemos trabajar el acceso a la vivienda digna, donde podemos implementar, ¿no?, experiencias de economía circular, el acceso a los servicios públicos, en definitiva, la igualdad de oportunidades, garantizar a los ciudadanos la igualdad de oportunidades. Y muchas veces, desgraciadamente, lo estamos haciendo muy solos y a veces no tenemos el apoyo económico necesario también para desarrollar esas políticas por parte de los Estados nacionales o de los Estados autonómicos. Por tanto, bueno, vamos a también pensar que esto deberíamos solucionarlo, tenemos que trabajar de una forma colaborativa. Acabo ya, quería simplemente, y después supongo que tendremos la ocasión, ¿no?, de poder discutir o atender preguntas del público. Creo que la única forma de superar esta situación es trabajar colaborativamente, trabajar juntos, instituciones, entidades, la ciudadanía, los sindicatos, el sector público, en definitiva también el sector privado, porque solamente juntos podremos superar estas desigualdades que se están produciendo desgraciadamente y que vivimos en nuestras ciudades.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Núria, for a very comprehensive vision statement. Let's hear from Carlos. You have done quite a lot of fascinating work on innovative issues around tackling urban challenges. And you have pioneered many of these areas, both in your advisory role and also as a renowned researcher. Share with us this concept of 15-minute city. How did you come up with this vision? How does it work?
Thank you so much for this kind of invitation. It's a real pleasure for me to be here with my colleagues. Núria, thank you for your warm welcome in Hospital de Llobregat. It's a pleasure to share with Salvador de Bahía and our colleague in South Africa. Anyway, in a few minutes for defining our mission statement, this panel, our target is to contribute to reflect about environmental justice, climate justice. In fact, this is a very nice opportunity for explaining how could we develop this 15-minute city in order to rebalance inequities, to fight against inequities, social, ecological, and economical. In reality, regardless of the size of cities, regardless of the cultural environment, regardless of the economic environment, cities are today the place for living the majority of people around the world. But cities are today the place for developing, unfortunately, a lot of inequities, poverty, exclusion, and today the new cancer, demagogic attitude, populism, and we need to propose a new way. The Sustainable Development Goals said we needed to fight against climate change. This is the 13th SDG. And the 11th SDG to have resilient, sustainable, and safe cities. In fact, if we wanted to develop more equity, if we wanted to fight against poverty, if we wanted to fight against social exclusion, this is not possible to continue to live in cities with the same paradigm for 70 years. The modern urbanism is in fact a economical, social, and urbanistic segregative still way. We need to transform today our cities for proposing with the proximities a new paradigm. The 15-minute city is a paradigm, I think that we could explain after, in order to develop this triple convergence: ecological, economical, and social. How? Because we could explore our proximities, we could reduce our CO2 emissions, we could create local employments, local jobs, we could develop the local commerce, we could develop the short circuit, we could transform the infrastructures, streets and boulevards, not for cars, but for human. We could develop the social link, we could take care of elderly people, with fragile people. We could reconquer the public spaces for democracy, for the social mixity. We could develop the new centers for take care of health, physical and mental. We could as well to develop the cultural activities. We could develop the education in proximity. We need today to develop a strong convergence between ecology, economy, and social impact with these happy proximities. We need to explore more and more the material or immaterial resources in proximities. This is the way for proposing around the world this vision of the 15-minute city as a resilient, inclusive, and
we're going to unpack
city.
more of that, Carlos. Sorry to interject. We're going to unpack more of that when we are at the debate stage. I just wanted you just to outline the vision.
Yes.
I can see the passion that comes with it. So let's take it from there. Vice Mayor of Salvador, a beautiful city in Brazil. Please share with us, Anna, how are you translating this vision of achieving environmental and social justice in your city? How do you see this being unpacked to create the kind of cities that must really drive sustainable agenda?
Okay, good afternoon. I'm glad to be here. In Salvador, we are almost 3 million people, live in a city full of hills, with 400 risk areas, and on top of a geological fault. We are famous for our carnival, our natural beauties, and happy people. We are investing in creative economy, in tech and health to make us a smart city. For us, a smart city is more than a concept. It works to make a place better to people live. So we are improving climate justice, environment and social equity, working to fight income inequality, to provide for the people food security and housing access. We are historically marked by vulnerability. 45% of our population lives in risk areas subject to landslides and floods. So in 2015, our mayor, Bruno Reis, and I were working in a social promotion department when strong rains arrived, killing 26 people and affecting thousands of people. So we are in field, listen people to emergency aid and social rent programs when we saw a injured man, looking like a hero. So I asked him, how can you looking by this way? And he asked me, I just saved my wife and my baby with my own hands. So it makes us more committed. Not only people, but to our city. And so, since then, our city has been working to improve human rights and amplify urban resilience through policies like our climate action plan. And we are investing 8% of our resources in poor areas, improving climate justice, with things like slope stabilization, it's so important to us, sewage collection, and other services, jumping from 18 to 62% in health basic service, and jumping 12th position in our national ranking education. We were the worst in our country. This started with a former mayor, Assemi Neto. We know that everybody is suffering with the pandemic, and in this context, let me ask you something. How many lives do you think we would lose if it rained during this period more than in 2015? It isn't a rhetorical question. You could see with my emotion. It rained more than the last 36 years, and we didn't lose a single life. But how could it be possible? Investing in planning, involving all the stakeholders, integrating departments, environmental education, and meteorological tech. We invested in governance and community engagement, creating projects like NUPDEC that identifies local leaders and form volunteers. This initiative showed us that we can move from hyperbolic to tactical steps, promoting citizens' empowerment. We know that social governance tech can save lives. For example, I will talk you one history. Mrs. Desiane and her child were in a municipal school when her house collapsed. It's in 2020. She was safe because one of the 11 Salvador systems of electric alarm worked. It wasn't a look episode. In another neighborhood, after 31 houses collapsed and almost 150 lives were saved using data analysis and communication. But we know that the weather events can be mortal even if you are prepared, and this is a global threat. So it's because I'm here. The world has been working on a strategic level to fight climate issues, but the most affected people are not involved as they need to be yet. We can't believe on development without sustainably. Fight poverty teaches us that we need to adopt policies that put together environmental, social, and economic issues, using education to avoid risky behaviors. In this way, do the people know what their governments are signing in Paris agreements, COP26, and other politics?
Okay, Anna. I would ask you to hold on there. So at some of the practical ideas you are beginning to unpack.
Okay.
When we have the debate, you are able to bring them to life.
Okay.
With the passion you have. My dear brother Hastings, on the line, you have been a known advocate for our cities to achieve all the climate ambitions and so on. How do we make sure that we practicalize issues of social and environmental justice? How does C40 drive this agenda in our different contexts across all our regions? Share with us your vision.
Thank you so much. I think for me, I want to start this conversation, to join this conversation by observing that the climate crisis in its own nature is not just. It is unfair, and most climate solutions leave out people who are suffering most. So the climate solutions themselves are not automatically just, they have to be made just. Because of that, climate change should be seen as an economic and social justice issue in all parts of the world. And for climate action to be just, we need to do some things differently. For climate change to have widespread citizen support and avoid pushback, it needs to deliver positive social outcomes besides the ecological and the environmental ones. Successful, inclusive climate solutions must therefore touch all the pressure points in the cities, from both high-income neighborhoods to low-income neighborhoods. It must ensure that the voices and needs of the most discriminated against and the marginalized people are heard, and that the benefits of climate action are accessed by everyone. Based on our C40 experience, we have a program called Inclusive Climate Action. We can achieve environmental and social justice by focusing on a number of things. I'll just quickly list them, and then we'll discuss during the dialogue. First, we need to make sure that we have credible data collection system and analysis on social and environmental pressures in cities. And this data should come from all parts, all corners of the city, including informal settlements where we have it. There is this laziness that we have sometimes. We find collecting data from informal settlements difficult. We need to reverse that. We are able to collect data from Mars, from the moon. We can collect data, credible data in informal settlements. We must do that. We need to create platforms of stakeholder engagement and collaboration to ensure that everyone in the city, young and old, rich and poor, employed and unemployed, is involved, is engaged, and is heard. We need to have tools and guidelines and technical assistance to city officials to implement the climate action plans and sectoral commitments well and effectively. And these tools should include tools like just transition pathways. But one last thing, we also need to learn from pilot projects. And I was glad that some of the speakers mentioned some of the activities that are happening. We are implementing some pilot projects together with C40 cities to showcase the results in order to spread success to cities around the world and enable them to learn from each other. So we have the C40 Inclusive Climate Action Forum basically to do that, to make sure that we learn from the best practices. So to me, those are some of the things that we need to focus on. In the interest of time, I'll stop here and then I'll add when we get to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Hastings. You have raised quite an interesting issue that we shouldn't just take climate action plans as just. They are not by design just until they deliver social and economic justice to each and every person in the city. That's quite a profound statement that you have made. But I would like us to get into a debate mode with the panelists. So after we have responded to specific questions I want to ask them, I will then open up the discussion with the participants in the plenary. And starting with you, Madam Núria, as the mayor of the city, you have quite been here for quite some time, and you have seen through some of the plans. Some, of course, might have worked. Some may have had some difficulties. But I'm sure you may want to share with us how you have actually practicalized your work around building a more sustainable, a more durable, a more inclusive city here at Los Hospitales. How have you done that practically?
Bueno, yo creo
So
que
I'll give 2 minutes to each and everyone to respond to those areas. How do we see the programs you have implemented on sustainability fitting into this concept of social and environmental justice? How did you bring them in?
Bueno, yo creo que partimos, ¿no?, del principio de que no hay una cosa sin la otra. Es decir, no puede haber avance medioambiental si no lo hacemos de una forma justa y no dejamos que nadie se quede atrás. Por tanto, bueno, hemos implementado en la ciudad diferentes tipos, ¿no? Lo comentaba ahora el representante de Sudáfrica. Hemos hecho pruebas piloto. Ha habido cosas que están funcionando y funcionan muy bien, y hay otras que quizás no vale la pena continuar o no, simplemente no han funcionado. Ahora, en estos momentos, estamos en un proyecto para nosotros muy ambicioso, que es a través de la situación que hemos vivido, del COVID-19, hemos observado que tenemos una desigualdad muy importante en cuanto a algo que tiene que ver con lo que estamos haciendo aquí, que es el Smart City, ¿no? Esa ciudad inteligente, esa utilización, ¿no?, de la tecnología que a veces nos parece que llega a todo el mundo, pero no es así. Durante el COVID hemos visto cómo, desgraciadamente, la brecha digital ha crecido y, por tanto, ha habido gente mayor, ¿no?, que no ha tenido acceso a esa posibilidad de utilizar la tecnología en un momento tan complicado, y en cambio hemos visto como niños, jóvenes, no han podido utilizar la tecnología porque no tenían acceso. Y ahí estamos en un proyecto que le hemos llamado el Hospitalet 6.0, con qué voluntad eliminar la brecha digital, dar igualdad de oportunidades también en eso, porque si perdemos esa oportunidad, estaremos incrementando todavía más la diferencia y la desigualdad. Por tanto, entendemos que es súper importante que tengamos administraciones digitalizadas, accesibles, tejido productivo, empresas, comercios, accesibles también y utilizando la tecnología. Por tanto, son procesos que tienen que ver con la tecnología, tienen que ver con el medio ambiente. Voy a poner solo un ejemplo. 100% de nuestras calles de la ciudad de Hospitalet son limpiadas, ¿no? Se están limpiando con agua del freático. Somos una de las pocas ciudades de nuestro entorno metropolitano, ¿no?, que toda nuestra agua que se utiliza para la limpieza viaria corresponde no de agua potable, sino agua que está en el subsuelo, en el freático.
No, thank you very much for those specific projects, very practical interventions and so on. On your side, Carlos, the 15 minutes, everybody is asking, why 15 minutes? Could it not have been a 30 minutes town? Will it be more inclusive if it's 15? Would it have been more inclusive if it was 45 minutes? Is it about the time? Can it really work in different contexts? If we were to say in the European context or in the Asia-Pacific context or South America or Africa, how do we give life to this 15 minutes issue given the many contradicting issues that reflect the social, economic, political realities that you were ably demonstrating here, that cities are centers of opportunities, but they can also be centers of exclusion if they're not managed very well. So how do we practicalize this concept?
Yes. In fact, there are a lot of inequities in cities. And the first inequities is the processes of metropolization with the long commute for people. Today, the average for going from my home to the office to work is more than 3 hours with a round trip. This is the first inequity because the long commute is one of the sources for this decrease the quality of life. The second point is, in fact, the very important inequities for using the material resources in cities. Cities, in fact, are totally segmented. We have the big corporate towers in the corporate districts. You have the historical center. We have the shopping centers, the popular districts, the middle class districts. In fact, the cities are totally segmented. Cities are not sustainable. Cities are totally out of the box if we wanted to fight for reducing the CO2 emissions. There are more important people with continue to use individual cars with the generation of pollution, air pollutions. And at the same time, there are some inequities in the social housing, because this is not exactly a social housing, but often we have been generating the new ghettos with poverty and social exclusion. Given that, we needed to shift our paradigm. We need to propose towards another vision for the social equity, economical equity, and climate justice. Okay. For that, we consider with the 15-minute city, the question is not if we have 10, 12, 15, 18. This is not the question. The question is how could you use differently the resources for living differently? In fact, until today, we didn't live in the normal conditions. We have very deep inequities. The 15-minute city is another lifestyles. This is not a magic wand for transforming in just a few weeks several decades of injustice. With the 15-minute city, we wanted to change our priorities.
Okay.
The priority is to offer the essential urban functions without long commute.
Okay.
The essential is to provide a lot of services in proximity. The 50-minute city is to provide the access to the nature, biodiversity, water, are not polluted. How? Our proposal is to define another still life based on 6 essential urban functions within short perimeter.
Okay.
To live in the good conditions, to work without a long commute, to supply using short circuits, to care with my mental and physical health in proximity, to educate, to have access to the culture and entertainment in proximity,
Okay,
and to
okay.
enjoy with nature and biodiversity. If we have the possibility, and I just to finish that now, if we have the possibility to provide these 6 urban social functions in a social circularity within a short perimeter, 15 minutes in the compact zone, on foot or by bike, in a polycentric city, in a city without a specific center, but in a multi-center city, with lot of services, with lot of commerce, with lot of hub for hosting workers. If we have the possibility for having the lot of cultural centers, sports centers.
We have heard you, Carlos. It's quite a very elaborate and well thought out concept, and we like that. Madam Matos, you have been in your city, and I'm amazed that you have got so many disaster risk points that are set up across the city to alert people when there are disasters and so on. How do we make sure that as you develop your city, you ensure maximum participation, inclusiveness of many people in the decision making, in the planning and prioritization of your town? But also, given that you are a very disaster prone town, how do you make sure that your mitigation strategy protects the most vulnerable, the poor in the city, so that they also feel included in the design and management of your city of Salvador?
We are investing so much in technology, meteorological techs, in cheaper technologies like geomets. I don't know if you know geomets, and the slopes stabilization. But the most important is the community engagement. Because when one of our 11 systems of alert of alarms ring, we in our center bank, in the observatory and control center, our technicals can know that one weather events are arriving, like extreme rains. But when we pull the button, when it rings in the community, many times people don't want to leave her house. So we have to train local leaders to work like volunteers that we put in our houses to invite the people to let down. We have a system to put them in our schools, like shelters, but how I said, it isn't enough, because we are doing hard, putting many resources in these areas, but climate change is a global threat. We need your help. So it was because I asked you if our poor people or local people know what we are doing in high level, because we learned that we have to do one step more. We have from strategic level to tactical level to construct a way to together to put our people, our child safe. So I know that we have been connected, working connected as an international community, engaging the locals on the whole process. They are the ones that suffer the most, so they need to be involved. I need to speak it to you because while we are talking, people are dying. And it's important to say that the pandemic changed our mindset and also demanded tech acceleration, making the impossible possible, as we could see with the vaccines. Based on this experience and my city experience, I know that a Brazilian student, an Indian teacher, and a Chinese expert, for example, can work on sustainable projects together. I had to read this to say that we are doing community engagement in my city. We are making policy publics hand by hand with the community, but it is enough. We have to do it together like a global community.
Thank you. Hastings, you raise a very important issue that climate just actions and the notions are not by themselves just. And that's very interesting that you have raised. Can you share with us how, as C40, how are you, as the family of cities, ensuring that these climate just plans deliver social equity, but at the same time, they ensure that there's inclusivity in the participation of communities across the lines in our cities? What practical agenda are you driving to promote equity and inclusion in your agenda?
Thank you. Thank you so much. There are two injustices that we are focusing on amongst the many other injustices, but I want to just give two examples. The first one is the unemployment injustice. So we are at the moment working in partnership with the labor unions, the labor union movement, to ensure that as we transition to a greener economy, as we really transition to green recovery, we are also addressing alongside it the issue of jobs. So we in a number of countries, we are really looking at how do we ensure that the climate actions in the climate action plans that cities have developed do also address the issue of unemployment. In South Africa, for example, we are now connecting the cities, 5 cities in South Africa that are part of C40, with the main labor union movement, the Congress of South Africa Trade Union, to work together, not to just really, to improve the relationship from an adversarial relationship to a relationship where they can work together to say, how do we make this transition equitable? How do we make this transition just? Looking at the jobs that can be generated from the green transition. So that's one injustice that we are dealing with. The second injustice we are dealing with is informality. Informal settlements, informal business is real. They are real in cities. So we are now working with cities to ensure that informal workers, informal settlers are not just regarded as criminals, but they can be regarded as partners once they are mobilized, organized, and an agenda is set. So in Accra, for example, we are working with the informal waste pickers, together with the city, working together to ensure that there is a partnership, not a criminal versus prosecutor relationship, but there is a partnership that what they do is formalized and contributes to the agenda of the city, and they earn a living, and they're not just left in conditions that are bad, but they're also not being perceived as criminals that you have to arrest each and every day you come into contact with them.
Thank you very much. We have had engagement with our fellow panelists in examining this topic. Very interesting angles and perspectives that they've shared, and how do we carefully examine this question in its manifestations, what are the dimensions that we look at. But it will be important that we don't talk to ourselves only. And perhaps some of you from the audience may have specific comments, may have specific contributions, or specific questions that you would like any of the panelists to respond to or reinforce the perspectives they have. So I would like to allocate the next 10 minutes to all of us in the audience. If you would like to raise something, there is micro points there in the middle of the walkways. Please feel free to contribute to the discussion. Identify yourself, and then you can ask the question to a particular panelist. The floor is open.
Hello. Thank you very much for this rich discussion. It was wonderful to hear the different voices. My name is Simina Lazar, and I lead a network called Aston, which is the network of African smart towns. It's not just towns, we also have capitals and metropoles. The question that I had for all the panel is that Sir Carlos Moreno said the city is not a sustainable place. The smart city is even less sustainable. We have very often the impression that technology is the solution. I think here we all agree that technology is just the means, not the end. Nonetheless, technology has an impact on the climate. It is said that the Greater Paris, 1/3 of the energy consumption will be data centers. We agree that that's not a world in which we can live. So my question to all of you is, in the cities that you are building, which have this strong interest both for the environmental justice and the social justice, how do you compose with the footprint, the carbon footprint of the smart city? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other taker for questions? The panelists will then share responses. If there's any other interesting question that you have, having listened to the inputs of our panelists. Well, it looks like there is no follow-up question at this point. I would like any of our panelists to contribute to the response of that question in a manner in which you want to respond. So now that we've got one question, maybe any one of you can respond to the question in your contribution. We start with you.
Sí.
Yeah.
Bueno, yo no puedo estar más de acuerdo, ¿no? con lo que comentaba, no recuerdo tu nombre, pero estoy totalmente de acuerdo. En tanto que representante, ¿no?, de una asociación de Smart Cities, bueno, es cierto, yo pienso exactamente lo mismo. No podemos poner en una ciudad inteligente no es aquella que tiene más sensores ni más cacharros, ¿no?, por toda la ciudad, sino es aquella que utiliza de una forma inteligente la tecnología y que pone en el centro de su acción, ¿no?, en el centro a la persona y a los problemas que tienen las personas. Y es evidente que la tecnología puede ayudarnos a envejecer de una forma más digna y poder estar más tiempo en tu propio entorno. Esto lo estamos viendo, ¿no?, como algunas tecnologías de última generación ayudan, ¿no?, a las personas mayores a poder estar en su domicilio hasta que ellos así lo deseen. O estamos viendo cómo se está utilizando pues también, ¿no?, esta tecnología para mejorar el día a día de todos en general. Esa es un poco la finalidad. Yo creo que cuando hablamos de Smart City, ¿no?, y ya que estamos en este congreso muy importante para aprender, creo que todos venimos aquí. Antes teníamos la oportunidad de recibir a una delegación, ¿no?, de Brasil, en la que ellos han venido, lógicamente, a poder explicar sus experiencias, pero sobre todo también a aprender ¿no?, de los avances, de la innovación, de la ciencia, de aquellas soluciones que nosotros, los representantes locales, estamos viendo cada día en nuestros pueblos y en nuestras ciudades. En definitiva, creo que yo creo que el giro, ¿no?, que se ha producido en el concepto de Smart City es un giro muy positivo, poner en el centro a las personas, evidentemente haciéndolo medioambientalmente sostenible. No podemos, a través de la tecnología, que todo valga. Por tanto, también ahí tenemos que ser equilibrados y, por tanto, no puedo estar más de acuerdo con lo que tú apuntabas.
Thank you very much, Núria. Carlos.
Yes, this is a very good question. In fact, in my opinion, this is very close, the opinion of Núria, but I want to develop 2 or 3 other ideas. First one, you're right. We need to be aware about the contribution of CO2 emissions when we have these intensive uses of digital technologies. And I agree with Núria, the smart city. This is not the technocentric city. This is not the lot of sensors, of actuators. We need to shift this paradigm. But this is the case with this Congress, Smart City, because in general we prefer to discuss about the role of citizen dwellers, the role of the human, how could we satisfy the needs of each one of us, instead of to discuss about the role of technology. However, we need to be clear that technologies are at the same time a powerful tool for living in cities. It is not possible today to imagine, for example, the bike sharing in cities without technologies, because we have this possibility for using the digital platforms for managing the bike sharing. In Paris, we are the first city for proposing the bike sharing. The first time with mechanical bikes, and after with the electrical bike. This is a very important contribution for fighting against CO2 emissions, because people could use electrical bikes instead of the individual car. This is not possible to design out the electrical bike sharing of the city of Paris without the technology. We need them. This is very, very important. And we need, in fact, in my opinion, to leave, to escape of the binary positions about the technologies. We need to give a vision, strategy. We need to transform the unsustainable cities, and sustainable cities, we need to reduce our CO2 emissions. But another point for this question, it is absolutely necessary for each one of us to be aware about our own contribution of CO2 emissions. When you send an email, when you download a film, when you prefer to watch a film by Netflix, when you prefer to use a digital platform, Alibaba or Amazon, for buying things, the systemic string for this each one of attitudes are very important contribution for CO2 emissions. The electronic commerce, the e-commerce, just for buying one book, we have, in general, the very, very strong contribution for CO2 emissions.
Okay.
And we need today to be aware that the individual behavior, the individual attitude, is one of the more contributive, unfortunately, actions for increasing CO2 emissions. For that, we needed to change the urban culture. We needed to change the citizen attitude. Yeah. We needed to escape to this definition of a zombie geek people totally hyper-connected by digital technologies, but socially disconnected. We needed to develop the pedagogical actions in order to reconquer public space, to reconquer proximities, to say hello to neighbors, to have the physical contact for people, to develop the physical a concrete action instead of to use digital technologies in all moments. We needed to reconquer more humanity in cities. But we needed to continue to use digital technologies because this is a very, very powerful tool for different activities, including for working with the remote jobs.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Anna, any perspective on the question?
Okay. How I said to us, as smart city is more than a concept, and the community engagement is a value. So we are working, but in our resources and international funds in poor areas, looking for new technologies and to do our place one better place to live. But I have to think with you about one step more, because I think that the problem isn't about a smart city, but a global smart or smart global. Because in the last years, we invested billions of dollars in poor areas, in urban requalification, in urban resilience, in health service, and other things. And unfortunately, today, we have less 5% of sewage collection in our city because new poor areas are formed. People that were living in other cities that were dying in their cities, so they didn't have another thing to do, came and formed new slum areas. So we have to work. And so I have one question for you. Please, think how we can improve new technologies for do better places to people, to do our world a better world. Because technologies don't make people, people make technologies. But you can know in your city, in your place, in your life, one better way to do something, a better way to do one policy public. So before I finish, I say I have to invite you to exchange experience, well-succeeded policies and aid. No matter if you are a local or a global leader, or a solo activist, or for academic, public, or private sectors. Or if we speak the same language, I have a difficulty with English, or we are in the same tech stage. For us, I think, that we have only work and dream together. So we are doing to do a smart city, but we can do it better with your help. Please, go to Salvador. We are waiting for you to do our city a better living place, and we are looking to help you to do your city a better place to live, a smart global, not only a smart city.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anna. Hastings, your take on the question?
All right. Okay, I think a lot has been said. I won't add much except just saying this thing. Being smart is not just about pushing answers. Being smart also includes understanding the problem, understanding the problems. When you understand the problems, then what happens is that your smart solutions become appropriate solutions for the problem. So smart city solutions are those solutions that are appropriate to the problems, those solutions that are appropriate to the context where the city is, those solutions that are appropriate to the people that we are trying to help or assist. So there is no one defined smart city, because the smart city is determined by the problem, is determined by the context, is determined by the people. But whether it's technology, whether it's whatever solutions, it must be appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all my fellow panelists. Another round of applause for their valuable contribution. Of course, they have raised very important issues right across. But there are about 5 take-home points that I've picked up, which I think they will prove invaluable to many of our engagements, wherever we come from, in terms of looking very deeply into this question of sustainable development agenda. How do we ensure that all issues are examined in a much more in-depth and balanced way? The issue of collaborative partnerships to tackle these challenges has been raised quite sharply, that answers will not lie with our city halls. We need to ensure that a number of stakeholders are rallied around, they are brought into the table to make sure that they share with us rich perspectives they have around inclusion and equality in terms of our planning. The second area is around this notion of justice, that when we talk about climate justice, sustainable justice, let's not only look at it purely from what the nice sounding words is, because it's quite clear that concepts themselves are not necessarily going to deliver justice around this area. So we need to understand multiple, the issue of manifestations of these issues, as well as dimensions in which we can look at justice. You now hear about issues of employment justice, issues of access to public transport, issues of access to decent sanitation. All of those areas needs to be examined quite closely so that we understand manifestations as well as different dimensions. The third area is around the need to ensure that issues of equity and fairness are very central to our design process of interventions that we want to do to make sure our cities are sustainable and so on. The fourth area is around the notion of proximities and paradigms that Carlos has raised, to make sure that we need to entertain these as shifts and paradigms that must not only talk about 15 minutes access for the sake of 15 minutes, but how do we make sure that access to our cities as centers of politics, as centers of culture, as centers of economic opportunities, everyone can plug himself or herself from anywhere. And it's important that we make sure that the paradigms we drive and proximities are very central to these areas. The fifth area is around ensuring that we build platforms of collaboration. And that's what Núria has indicated. How do we build those platforms of collaboration, but also ensure that there are clear tools and guidelines for all of us to make sure that everyone can participate meaningfully and effectively. And also debunk the myth that smart cities is about to be connected, hyper connectivity. How do we make sure that it doesn't replace social connectivity of people? As Carlos was saying to all of us, how do we make sure that people participate in a meaningful way? And Anna has raised the same issues, as well as Hastings. So those are the 5 key issues that I thought are very important in making sure that we can have balanced development around the question of moving visions of our cities that really build towards social and environmental justice. So I hope all of those points would really help us to go forward in a meaningful way. On that note, I would like to, I don't know whether you will be able to close. Yes, and then we will, thank you very much.
Xolile, George, our wonderful moderator, thank you all very much indeed. A real good attempt, I think, at grappling with the issues of justice, to social exclusion and environmental justice. Really good points. I think that one size does not fit all, yes? Thank you very much indeed. I think you can all go and get yourself a cup of tea now, if you would like. Hastings, Chikoko, in Johannesburg. Thank you very much indeed for your contribution as well. Really clear, incisive points. Thank you very much indeed. So that concludes day 2 here at the Smart Cities Expo World Congress. However, tomorrow, we've got some very good information for you to digest, some very good events for you to take part in. Cities and global governance towards an inclusive multilateralism. Is multilateralism failing us? I think I quite like that one. Also, revitalizing our cities, relaunching local economies, and last but not least, there's the 10th anniversary party at 3:30 in this very auditorium, so don't miss that. Hope to see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much.